The millionaire prepared dozens of invitations to organize a big birthday party for his special son. The boy, beaming, was overwhelmed with happiness, but the joy soon turns to pain. Sometime later, the millionaire discovers the cruel truth. No one in the class likes the boy, and no colleague intends to attend. Heading home with a broken heart, he would never have imagined the scene he would find when he opened the door. The rain fell in dense curtains over Park Avenue, turning the glass and steel skyscrapers into smudges of titanium and charcoal. Inside the electric car, the silence was absolute, broken only by the hypnotic rhythm of the windshield wipers. Richard was driving, but his mind was miles away, trapped in an office on the 20th floor, where his computer screen displayed a list of contacts and a cruel silence. Not a single yes. Not one confirmation. The knot in his stomach tightened with every red light, with every drop of rain that trickled down the glass like a slow tear. He had built a considerable fortune, a business empire that spanned different sectors, yet he felt powerless in the face of a simple birthday party. Leo's party, his son. He had delegated everything, as he always did. The best event planner, the most sought-after caterer, an entertainer famous among the children of New York's elite. The money had been transferred without hesitation, another testament to his ability to provide, to offer the world. However, the world he offered felt empty. The invitations, with their expensive cardstock and impeccable calligraphy, had vanished into a vacuum of indifference. No replies. The guest list remained desolately blank, and the guilt, like the rain outside, was insistent and cold. How had he not noticed? How could he have been so immersed in spreadsheets of profits and dividends that he failed to see that Leo's smile, upon returning from school, had been shrinking week after week? The light in the boy's eyes, once so bright, now seemed like a flickering flame. He had been physically present, but his mind, his focus, had always been elsewhere, calculating risks, projecting the growth of his capital. The car glided smoothly through the gates of the mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut. The imposing facade, which usually brought him a sense of accomplishment, today seemed accusatory. It was a house, not a home, a space filled with designer objects and long silences. He parked, turned off the engine, and remained motionless for a moment, his chest heavy. He imagined the scene that awaited him, deflated balloons in the corner of the living room, the untouched cake in the refrigerator, and Leo in his room, understanding what absence meant. That thought was more terrifying than any stock market crash. He opened the car door, the damp air enveloping him. He walked up the stone pathway, each step a sentence. The key turned in the lock with a click that echoed in his ears. He pushed the door open, expecting shadows, the silence of defeat. Instead, he was met by a soft light coming from the kitchen and a sweet, comforting smell of freshly baked cinnamon coffee cake. It was an aroma that didn't belong in that house, a scent of affection and simplicity. His eyes adjusted, and he saw the room was not empty. Colorful crepe paper streamers, clearly handmade, were hung on the walls, crooked and charming. In the center of the small breakfast nook table, 4 paper plates and a handful of homemade fudge. And there she was, Helena, the nanny, wearing an apron, her eyes shining with a restrained emotion. In her hands, a simple cake with a single lit candle. Beside her, Leo, a lopsided party hat on his head, was clapping, his face lit with a pure, genuine joy. The boy looked at the woman beside him, the smile Richard had missed so much filling his entire being. Then Leo's voice, clear and full of love, cut across the room. "I love you, Mommy. Thank you." Richard's heart shattered. The word "mommy," said so naturally to someone else, hit him with the force of a punch. And there, on the threshold of his own home, for the first time in years, the billionaire wept without trying to hide it. Richard's tears dried on his face, leaving a cold trail of shame. Leo, oblivious to his father's emotional storm, continued to smile, holding Helena's hand with a disarming trust. It was she who broke the silence, her voice as soft as the smell of the cake that still warmed the room. She didn't question him, didn't judge him. She simply began to recount the day's events with the simplicity of someone telling a story to a child. In the morning, noticing Leo's sadness over the lack of replies to the invitations, she had taken him to the local bakery. The boy, who loved the smell of fresh bread, was enchanted by the baker's daughter, a little girl with pigtails who offered him a jelly-filled donut. The invitation was made right there, amidst flour and sugar, and accepted with a smile. Later, in the grand entryway of their own estate, they ran into the groundskeeper's son, who always waved to Leo from afar. He was invited too. Finally, a short walk to the nearby playground yielded two more guests. Two children playing on the swings, who, with the curiosity typical of childhood, agreed to join a party. As Richard listened, the weight of his own failure became more evident. He had mobilized his assistant, used an online event platform, and considered every logistical detail, treating his son's birthday like another of his grand business deals. His method was impersonal, efficient, based on the logic that a large investment should guarantee a large return. Helena, on the other hand, had used what he couldn't buy: empathy, observation, and human warmth. She told him, her eyes still moist, how she had taught the little visitors to sing "Happy Birthday" the way Leo liked it, with long, dramatic pauses so he could blow out each of the 7 imaginary candles before the real one. The boy's rhythm set the pace of the scene. For Richard, accustomed to a constant cash flow and the accelerated returns of his investments, that slowness was a new universe. He looked at his son, who was now showing a teddy bear how to clap in the right rhythm, and felt the chasm between the father he was and the father he should be. He thanked Helena with a choked voice, a thank you that sounded insufficient even to his own ears. He retreated to his office, the sanctuary of his wealth, where stock market charts flickered on silent screens. He needed a moment to compose himself, to understand that mixture of gratitude and humiliation. It was then that his phone buzzed with a notification, a message from his publicist, with a link and a single sentence: "This is a problem." He clicked. The screen lit up with a short video. It was the little party, the simple table, the crepe paper streamers, Leo blowing out the candle in his unique time, and the other children singing, happy. The image was sweet, but Richard's heart went cold. The video was on a gossip account, with thousands of views and malicious comments about the billionaire's son's makeshift birthday. Fury rose in him, blinding all feelings of gratitude. He saw it as an exposure, a breach of trust, an incalculable risk to the image he protected as zealously as his dollar-denominated fortune. He marched back to the kitchen, the phone in his hand like a weapon. Helena was clearing the table, humming a lullaby. He gave her no time. "What is this, Helena?" he asked, his voice hard, sharp, the same one he used in meetings to fire executives. He showed her the phone. "Did you film my son and put it on the internet? For everyone to see? For everyone to mock him?" Helena's smile vanished. Her shoulders slumped as if seeking protection. She paled, the dish towel falling from her hands. The accusation hit her full force, reopening old wounds of feeling invisible, used, disposable. She looked at the man before her, the same one who had been crying at his door minutes earlier, and saw a stranger, a boss, an employer who saw her not as an ally, but as a threat. "No," she whispered, her voice weak, trembling. "I would never do that." But he didn't seem to hear, his face a mask of wounded pride and protective fury. The wound was open, and doubt hung in the air, poisonous and cold. Did he really trust her, or just the function she performed in his perfectly organized life? Richard's accusation hung in the air, dense and toxic. Helena's face, once flushed from the warmth of the oven, turned pale and her shoulders hunched, an instinctive gesture of someone who had learned her whole life to take up as little space as possible. For a long moment, she said nothing, just stared at him, the pain in her eyes more eloquent than any words. She felt naked, exposed, as if he had ripped off her apron and her soul with the same violence. Finally, she found her voice, a trembling thread of dignity. "I did film it. Yes, Mr. Sterling. A 20-second clip." She walked to the counter, picked up her own phone, her hands shaking slightly. "I sent this video to only one person." With her finger, she opened the messaging app and showed him the screen. It was a chat with a man named Mr. Rossi Baker. The video was there, followed by a voice message from her. "Mr. Rossi, look how much joy your granddaughter brought to our little party. Leo was so happy. Just so you know, he can't have any red food dye, and we make the fudge with a little less sugar. If she wants seconds, it's okay." Richard felt the blood drain from his face. The explanation was so simple, so genuinely careful, that his suspicion became monstrous. He had constructed a complex scenario of betrayal and a quest for fame, when the reality was just an act of kindness and care. The malice had not come from her, but from an anonymous account that had somehow gained access to the video and reposted it with cruelty. He lowered his phone, the weight of the device in his hand suddenly unbearable, as was the weight of his own arrogance. "Helena, he began, but the words seemed stuck in his throat. Apologizing was something he rarely did. In his world of business and high performance, an apology was a liability, an admission of weakness. But there, before this wounded woman, he felt smaller than ever. "I'm sorry. I was unfair, hasty. I'm truly sorry." The apology came out, but it sounded hollow, an insufficient repair for the crack he had just created in the fragile trust that bound them. She just nodded, a minimal gesture, and picked up the dish towel from the floor. There were no tears, no recriminations, just a silence that was colder and more distant than any fight. In the days that followed, the house regained a superficial routine of normalcy, but the atmosphere was different. Helena continued to be impeccable in her duties, but the spontaneity was gone. She addressed him as Mr. Sterling. Her answers were brief and objective, and she avoided his gaze. The invisible barrier between employer and employee, which the improvised party had momentarily torn down, had been rebuilt, taller and stronger. The warmth of the cinnamon coffee cake had dissipated. However, her love for Leo remained unshakable, a force of nature that not even Richard's harshness could diminish. She created a set of visual flashcards for the boy, with simple drawings illustrating step by step the choreography he liked to do when singing "Happy Birthday." Leo would spend hours in front of the mirror, practicing, the cards lined up on the floor. In a corner of the living room, she set up the hug corner, a small refuge with soft cushions, a weighted blanket, and headphones to block out the world's sounds when he felt overwhelmed. Richard began to come home from work earlier, a subtle change in his routine. He didn't announce his arrival, just stood in the doorway, observing. He saw the chocolate fudge being offered on Leo's favorite blue spoon, heard the soft music on the radio playing an old jazz standard, saw the family dog lying at the boy's feet as he hummed to the cards, and he felt a pang of something he couldn't name, a mixture of admiration, envy, and loneliness. The following Friday, exactly 1 week after the party, an official email from Leo's school arrived in Richard's inbox. The subject line was "Alignment Meeting." The body of the text was brief and corporate. He opened the attachment, a 1-page report. He read the sentence that made him feel the floor disappear again, a cold, impersonal sentence that was a slap in his face. "We have observed low peer engagement in social events proposed for the student. We believe this is due to a natural lack of affinity within the peer group. The final sentence was the most devastating, a veiled suggestion inviting him to give up. To avoid future frustration for the child, we suggest that birthday celebrations be restricted to the family environment. The email from the school burned on Richard's computer screen like an insult. Lack of affinity. The phrase was so corporate, so antiseptic, it made the rejection even more brutal. It was the language he himself used to justify ending a business partnership or selling off underperforming assets. Now, that same coldness was being applied to his son. The suggestion to restrict parties to the family environment was a veiled command to hide Leo, to accept exclusion as a fact of life, an initial fury, a volcanic impulse to call his army of lawyers and start a lawsuit that would shake the foundations of that institution, consumed him. He paced his office, his wounded pride screaming for a spectacular retaliation. He had the capital and the resources to turn that school into a pile of legal liabilities. It would be a war, and he was used to winning wars. It was at that moment that Helena entered, silent as always. She carried a tray with a glass of water and the headache medicine he often took on stressful days. She didn't ask what had happened. Her observant, deep-set eyes had already read the storm on his face. She placed the tray on the mahogany desk and, instead of leaving, remained standing, her hands clasped in front of her. There was a serene courage about her he had never seen before. "Mr. Sterling," she began, her voice low but firm. "I know what the school said, but maybe there's another way." She held out a small hardcover notebook, a simple kind you could buy at any stationery store. He took it, suspicious. I've been writing a few things down these past few months. Things Leo tells me, or things I see when I pick him up." He opened the notebook. Helena's handwriting was round and clear. There were dates, names, and short descriptions. April 12th. Invitation to Sophia's birthday party, handed out. No reply. April 25th. At pickup, heard Lucas and Peter call him Slow Poke. May 3rd. At the music recital, the teacher left him out of the choreography, saying he might throw off the rhythm for the others. Page after page, it was a meticulous diary of invisibility, of the small cuts that, when added up, bled more than one open wound. It was irrefutable proof that this wasn't about a lack of affinity, but about a systematic and silent exclusion. Along with the problem, Helena brought a suggestion. "Perhaps you could propose a conversation, mediated friendship circles for the students. And a few small adjustments in the classroom, softer lighting, a quiet place for him to calm down. Simple things." Her proposal was the opposite of his instinct, dialogue instead of litigation, building bridges instead of blowing them up. For the first time, Richard felt genuinely torn. The path of confrontation was familiar, a demonstration of power, the defense of his most precious assets. But at what cost? Exposing Leo in the media, turning him into a case, a news story. The fear of that exposure was greater than his thirst for justice. He looked at the notebook in his hands, at Helena's care, and then toward the door, imagining his son in the hug corner. He had tried to solve this with money and power, and he had failed. Maybe it was time to try with care and dialogue. "Get the car, Helena. We're going to the school, and you're coming with me." The headmistress, a woman with a practiced smile and a pearl necklace, received them in an impeccable office. Richard G., following Helena's lead, remained calm. He presented the notebook not as an accusation, but as a concern. He spoke about the friendship circles, about the sensory adjustments. The headmistress listened with an expression of false empathy. When he finished, she adjusted her glasses. "I understand your anguish, Mr. Sterling. But childhood dynamics are a delicate universe. We can't force friendships." She leafed through the notebook with her fingertips, as if handling something contagious. "This is all very anecdotal. What I propose is that, after the summer break, we begin a case study, with our pedagogical team to evaluate the best path toward integration." She smiled, ending the meeting. Richard and Helena left the office with the notebook in their hands and the certainty that they had hit a wall of bureaucracy and indifference. The headmistress's proposal was clear: push the problem off until it went away. The ride back from the school was shrouded in a heavy silence. Richard's frustration was a thundercloud inside the car, while Helena's disappointment was a fine, persistent drizzle. She had offered a bridge, and the headmistress had dynamited it with a polite smile. When they arrived at the mansion, the door opened before Richard could use his key. On the threshold stood Isabella, his former partner, elegant in a white linen suit that seemed immune to the city's humidity. She wasn't Leo's mother, but they had shared years of an intense social life where image was the primary asset. Isabella exuded expensive perfume and a calculated concern. "Richard, darling, I heard about the incident, the video, the school. I'm terribly worried about the repercussions for our businesses, for our image." She swept in, dismissing Helena with a barely perceptible nod, as if she were part of the furniture. Her eyes scanned the crepe paper streamers, which were still hanging, with a faint trace of disdain. Leo ran into the room but stopped short upon seeing Isabella, taking a step back to hide behind Helena's legs. Isabella forced a smile. "We need to be practical, Richard. This situation has gotten out of control. Your net worth's reputation is at stake. We can't leave any room for speculation." She sat in an armchair, her legs crossed, the posture of someone about to close a deal. This domestic improvised approach, it's sentimental but dangerous. Leo needs the best. I've researched a clinic in Switzerland, Le Clermont. It's the most renowned in Europe for children like him. Specialists, absolute discretion. They would handle everything. And as for the nanny, she said, the word dripping with meaning, it's time to end this cycle. We need professionals, not well-intentioned amateurs who could accidentally expose the entire family. The suggestion landed like a block of ice in the room. Send Leo away, outsource his care to another continent, fire Helena. It was a clean, corporate, and inhumane solution. Richard looked at his son, cowering, and at Helena, whose face was impassive, a mask of neutrality that barely concealed her hurt. The clinic's name, Le Clermont, was repeated by Isabella, as if the sound itself evoked exclusivity and efficiency. It was then that Leo, who had been silent until that moment, gripped Helena's skirt tighter and said, his voice muffled with panic, "No, I don't want to go. Stay here. Lena." The plea was a whisper, but it echoed in the room like a scream. For the first time, Helena broke her professional silence in front of Isabella. She knelt to be at Leo's level, never letting go of his hand. In a low but clear voice, she addressed Richard. "Sir, he has a right to be heard. This decision is about his life." Isabella laughed, a sound as crystalline as it was cruel. "A right? He's a child, Helena, and you're an employee. Don't confuse the two." The taunt hit its mark. Richard, caught between Isabella's cold logic, which for so long had been his own, and Helena's emotional defense, felt cornered. He wanted to protect his son, but he also wanted to silence the chaos. And, in his desperation to regain control, he made the mistake. He looked at Helena, not as the woman who had created a party from nothing, but as the employee who, in his distorted view, was crossing a line. "Helena, she's right." The words escaped before he could stop them, harsh and final. "You're overstepping your role." The world seemed to stop for a second. Helena's hand loosened its grip on Leo's. She rose slowly, her dignity a fragile armor. Her face showed no anger, only a deep sorrow, a resigned acknowledgement of her place. She took a step back, then another, once again becoming the invisible figure he had just accused her of being. The house, which for a few days had felt warmer, more alive, plunged back into a glacial cold. And Richard, standing between the two women, realized that in trying to fix one crack, he had just shattered what little of value remained. Those words, "You're overstepping your role," hung in the house for 2 full days, a toxic fog seeping into every room. The mansion, which for a brief period had felt the warmth of a home, reverted to its former cold, silent structure. The old jazz standard no longer played on the kitchen radio. The scent of cinnamon coffee cake had been replaced by the antiseptic aroma of cleaning products. Helena moved through the house like an efficient shadow, her gestures precise, her face a mask of impenetrable professionalism. She was no longer Leo's Lena. She was the employee, the nanny, the exact role to which Richard had relegated her. She tidied the boy's room, prepared his meals, and helped with his tasks. But the spontaneity, the conspiratorial laughter, the tenderness that had overflowed in her gestures had retreated to a deep and protected place within her. Leo sensed the change with the precision of a seismograph. The boy, a barometer of the house's emotions, became quiet and withdrawn. The hug corner remained untouched. The happy birthday visual cards were forgotten in a drawer. He spent more time in his room, whispering to his toys, and when his father approached, he would shrink away, as if the conflict between the adults was a coat too heavy for his shoulders. Richard felt the chasm widening with every hour. He went to his office on Park Avenue, a place where he was a giant, a multimillionaire whose decisions could alter the flow of a nation's capital. He looked at the charts showing the profitability of his investments, the growth of his assets, but all he could see was the immense emotional liability he had created in his own home. He realized with bitter clarity that managing a stock portfolio was infinitely easier than navigating the complex emotions of the 2 people he had hurt. Pride, the armor that had served him so well in the business world, was now suffocating him. He had apologized for the first accusation, the one about the video, but how could he apologize for something deeper? How could he admit that, at the crucial moment, he had chosen status over humanity? How could he tell Helena that her value extended far beyond her role? On the evening of the second day, he returned home to an even deeper silence. Leo was already asleep. Helena was in the kitchen, finishing cleaning the stove, about to retire to her quarters. The sight of her, her back to him, focused on her task so she wouldn't have to face him, was the last straw for his torment. He couldn't bear another day of this frost. He took a step forward, the sound of his shoes on the marble making her startle. She turned, ready to receive an order. Richard swallowed hard, his arrogance giving way to a helplessness he rarely felt. "Helena," he began, his voice lower than he intended. The words of apology died before they were born. Seeming inadequate, he changed tactics, searching for a gesture, something that could begin to melt the wall he himself had built. He looked at her hands, the hands that had made the party, that had drawn the cards, that had comforted his son. "Can you teach me how to make Leo's fudge?" he asked, the sentence coming out almost as a plea, the way he likes it, with less sugar. The request was so unexpected, so far outside the employer-employee script, that Helena stood motionless. She stared at him, her eyes searching for the truth behind his words. For a moment, time stood still. The kitchen, once a territory of coldness, became a silent battlefield between her wounded pride and his belated regret. The decision she would make next, the simple act of reaching for a can of condensed milk or not, seemed to carry the weight of the entire household's future. Helena's eyes studied him for a long moment, a silent analysis that seemed to weigh years of invisibility against this single, clumsy peace offering. Richard felt like a defendant awaiting a verdict. He, who commanded boardrooms with a mere raise of an eyebrow, stood there, vulnerable, in his own kitchen, waiting for permission to handle a saucepan. Finally, she let out a nearly imperceptible sigh and turned to open a cabinet. Without a word, she placed a can of condensed milk, a carton of heavy cream, cocoa powder, and a stick of butter on the marble countertop. The gesture was her answer. The truce was accepted. The kitchen, once a stage for tension, transformed into neutral territory. Under her guidance, her voice low and precise, he learned to scrape the can, to mix the ingredients in the right order, to stir the mixture over low heat, constantly, so it wouldn't clump. They didn't talk about what had happened. They talked about the consistency of the fudge, but how Leo liked it softer, to eat with a spoon. It was an indirect communication, where each act of teaching and learning was a small step toward rebuilding the bridge he had demolished. When the glossy, fragrant mixture was ready, he spooned it onto a plate and felt a childish satisfaction, a pride that none of his multi-million-dollar stock market transactions had ever given him. The next day, a Saturday, the atmosphere was lighter. The ice had thawed into a fine mist, still present, but one you could see through. It was during breakfast that Helena, her courage renewed by the small progress of the night before, made a new proposal. She showed him a web page on her phone for an association of families with children who have Down syndrome. They're having a blue picnic this afternoon at Willow Creek Park. It's a get-together for families to meet, share experiences. I thought maybe Leo would like it. Richard looked at the photo on the screen, smiling children sitting on plaid blankets on the grass. There was no formality, no pressure from the elite school. There was just community. He looked at his son, who was eating his toast with the fudge his father had made, and made a decision that went against all his instincts for seclusion and control. "We'll go." He left his expensive watch in a drawer, swapped his leather shoes for sneakers, and put on a simple t-shirt. No suit, no driver, no armor of his fortune. When they arrived at the park, the smell of damp grass and popcorn filled the air. A group was playing guitar, children were running around, and parents were chatting in lively circles. No one recognized him as the Park Avenue billionaire. Here, he was just Leo's dad. And Leo, for the first time in a long time, seemed to belong. He approached a group playing a slower version of tag and was immediately included. He made friends with a boy named David and a girl named Julia. With the help of one of the mothers, he learned to spell his name with colorful modeling clay. Richard watched from a distance, his heart tight with an overwhelming emotion. That scene was the greatest wealth he could ever possess. At that moment, he understood. As the sound of music and laughter surrounded him, a mother approached. "Your son is a light. Could I film you two dancing for a bit? I want to show our group what a difference a present father makes." Richard, stripped of his pride and his fear, smiled and nodded. He took Leo by the hand and, to the sound of a children's song, spun with his son on the grass, in pure, genuine joy. That evening, back at home, his phone, which usually buzzed with investment alerts and business emails, began to vibrate non-stop. There were dozens, then hundreds, of social media notifications. The video of their dance, posted with the caption, "A present father is the greatest treasure," had gone viral. Sunday morning arrived with the incessant buzzing of Richard's phone. The video of the dance in the park had spread through social media like wildfire, a wave of positivity that caught him completely by surprise. There were shares, praiseworthy comments, messages from other parents thanking him for the representation. For the first time, an exposure of his personal life didn't generate columns in the financial pages about his investments, but a current of human warmth. He felt a genuine pride, a new sensation of having done something right, not for profit, but for love. The joy, however, was short-lived. The first call of the day was from Marcus, his publicist, his voice bordering on hysteria. "Richard, what is this disaster? You're dancing in a park like a dad from a margarine commercial. Where's the exclusivity, the seriousness? Our clients invest in you because you're a fortress, a cold mind that multiplies their capital, not a digital influencer. This dilutes your brand. It makes you common. The criticism was sharp, a direct assault on the armor Richard had spent his life building. Marcus spoke of risk, of losing credibility in the market. He threatened to break their contract if this populist narrative continued. You need to control the story, Richard, or it will swallow you whole. He had barely hung up when the doorbell rang. It was Isabella, her face a mask of restrained fury beneath flawless makeup. She entered without being invited, her eyes flashing. "I can't believe you fell for this trick," she hissed, pointing an accusatory finger toward the kitchen, where Helena was watching the scene in silence. "This was planned. This woman is using you, using Leo, to promote herself. First, the video of the failed party to generate pity. Now, the video of the redeemed father to win public sympathy. She's an opportunist, Richard, and she's destroying your reputation." The accusation poisoned the air. Helena, who heard everything, didn't move. She didn't try to defend herself, didn't shed a tear. She just fixed her gaze on Richard, a look that didn't plead but demanded a stance. Who would he believe? His former partner, who only saw the world through the lens of status and possessions? Or the woman who had created a refuge for his son with crepe paper and a cinnamon coffee cake? Isabella's words, though cruel, sparked a flicker of doubt in Richard's mind. Not about Helena's character, but about the origin of all this chaos, the coincidence of the two videos. The way the first was twisted to seem negative and the second became virally positive. There was something else at play. He felt he was reacting to events rather than understanding them. He needed answers, not opinions. While Isabella continued her furious monologue about the importance of protecting the family legacy and business image, Richard retreated to his office. He didn't call his lawyers, as he would have before. He called a cybersecurity specialist, a discreet genius who protected his digital assets, including his cryptocurrency wallets. The order was short and direct. "I want you to trace the origin of the anonymous account that posted the first video of my son. I want to know who created it, where it was posted from, no resource limits." The wait was agonizing. Hours later, an encrypted email arrived. Richard opened it, his heart pounding. The report was technical, precise. The account, NYCobserver77, had been created, and the video uploaded from an IP address located in Westchester County. But the final piece of information was what made Richard's blood run cold. The IP was registered to the network of the Crestwood Academy, Leo's school, and the user login associated with the post belonged to an administrative assistant, an employee known to be the headmistress's right-hand woman. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with brutal clarity. His son's exclusion hadn't been an accident. It had been an orchestrated campaign. With the digital report burning in his retina, Richard felt his fury transform. It was no longer the blind, impotent rage of a wounded father. It was the cold, calculated fury of a strategist who had just discovered the enemy within his own walls. He stood up and walked back to the living room, where Isabella was still lecturing about the devaluation of his personal brand. He stopped in front of her, his silence more intimidating than any shout. "It's over, Isabella," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Your concern for the image, for the business, for what other people think, it's over." She looked at him, shocked by the interruption. "But Richard, I'm trying to protect our—" "There is no our," he cut her off. "There is my son, and you never understood that." He opened the door. "Please leave, and don't come back." The command was so final, so irrevocable, that for the first time, the elegant and controlled Isabella was speechless. She stood up, smoothed her suit, and left without a backward glance, leaving only the trail of her expensive perfume behind. Richard closed the door and turned to Helena, who remained in the same spot, a silent witness to the entire scene. He walked over to her, The phone still in his hand. He didn't apologize with words, knowing they would be insufficient. Instead, he showed her the screen. He showed her the report, the IP address, the name of the employee linked to the headmistress. He made her his accomplice, his ally, sharing the raw, unvarnished truth. Helena's eyes scanned the lines of text, and a single, silent tear rolled down her cheek. It was not a tear of sadness, but of vindication and of pain for Leo. "I'm sorry I didn't trust you from the start," Richard said, his voice finally breaking. "I'm sorry I put you in this position." She just nodded, and in that gesture, he understood that forgiveness, though unspoken, had been granted. From that moment on, he acted with surgical precision. He locked himself in his office and made a single call, not to the headmistress, but to the chairman of the school's board. A man whose investment fund he had saved from bankruptcy years ago. The conversation was brief and icy. He presented the facts, the digital proof, and delivered an ultimatum. Either a formal inquiry would be opened immediately and the employee suspended, or the next morning the story, with all the evidence, would be on the front page of every major newspaper, along with a lawsuit that would turn the school's assets into monumental liabilities. The response was immediate. 20 minutes later, the headmistress called, her voice trembling, to inform him that the employee had been suspended and an internal investigation had begun. The consequences of his stand were not long in coming. Marcus, the publicist, called to inform him that a major client, concerned about the potential negative publicity, had suspended a consulting contract. It was a small financial loss in his investment universe, but symbolically significant. The old Richard would have panicked, would have tried to reverse the situation. The new Richard simply replied, "Let them go. My cash flow can handle it." At home, in the midst of this Cold War, a small, painful victory blossomed. Leo, sensing the shift in energy, the unity between his father and Helena, approached them with shining eyes. "Daddy, Lena, can we have another party? A mini redo party? Just with cake and 3 games. The request, so pure and full of hope, was a gut punch to both adults. It was proof of Leo's resilience and a test of their courage. Pressured by the inquiry, the school authorized a new invitation, simple and handwritten by Leo and Helena, to be distributed in the classroom. As the colorful envelopes were prepared, Richard felt a mix of hope and dread, knowing that outside, the forces that wanted to silence his son were still lurking. The preparation for the mini redo party transformed the mansion. Hope was a palpable ingredient, mixing with the smell of butter and chocolate in the kitchen. Leo, with the concentration of a master chef, helped Helena roll fudge balls, his fingers sticky and his smile constant. Richard, for the first time, actively participated. He set aside the spreadsheets tracking his investment fund returns and sat at the breakfast nook table, helping his son draw little suns on the invitation envelopes. It was a scene of domesticity, so simple and so profound, it felt like it belonged to another life. He felt that each crayon stroke was a more valuable investment than all the stocks he owned. The fortune that truly mattered was right there, at that table, in the pure expectation of a child who just wanted to be accepted. However, outside the mansion's walls, Isabella's revenge moved through the digital shadows. In a private parents' group for the school, she planted the seed of suspicion. "Just be careful," she wrote, under the guise of genuine concern. "That nanny has ambitions." The park video was just the beginning. "I've heard she plans to use this little party to record more material, to promote herself at the expense of the children's innocence. Don't expose your kids to that." The lie, because it was cruel and plausible in the cynical universe they inhabited, spread quickly. The fear of exposure, of having their children's image associated with a case, was stronger than empathy. Oblivious to the poison that was spreading, the small family of 3 celebrated each small victory. On Wednesday, Helena's phone rang. It was the mother of a classmate named Michael. "We got the invitation. Michael would love to come." Confirmed. A look of relief and joy was exchanged between her and Richard. On Thursday, another text message arrived. Clara's mother, "Yes, we'll be there." 2 confirmations. To Richard, it was proof that his firm stance was beginning to bear fruit. The small lost contract seemed a trivial price to pay for that moment. Leo, upon hearing that Michael and Clara were coming, ran through the house, rehearsing how he would greet them, how he would teach them the happy birthday choreography. Hope had solidified, becoming almost a certainty. On Saturday afternoon, the house was ready. A small table in the living room was covered with a colorful tablecloth. There were 4 paper plates, 4 cups, and a chocolate cake with sprinkles. 3 activities were arranged on the rug: modeling clay, building blocks, and the happy birthday visual cards. Leo wore his favorite Spider-Man t-shirt and looked at the clock every 5 minutes. Richard and Helena watched him, their hearts torn between joy and an anxiety that wouldn't leave them. An hour before the party, Richard's phone rang. It was Michael's mother. Her voice was rushed, uncomfortable. "Richard, 1,000 apologies, but something terrible has come up. We won't be able to make it. I'm so sorry." He barely had time to process the blow when, 10 minutes later, a text message arrived from Clara's mother. The text was almost identical. "Hi dear, a last-minute emergency came up. We can't attend. Next time, kisses." The silence that followed was deafening. The cake seemed to mock them from the center of the table. The 4 colorful cups were witnesses to a calculated rejection. Leo, who hadn't understood the calls, continued to wait, his face pressed against the living room window, searching for cars that would never arrive. Time dragged on, heavy and cruel. The hours passed. The afternoon light began to fade, dyeing the room in melancholic shades of orange and grey. The cake remained untouched. The fudge, perfect in its little paper cups, went uneaten. Richard felt the floor disappear from under him, a sense of total powerlessness that suffocated him. Finally, Leo turned away from the window. His eyes, large and full of an understanding no child should possess, scanned the empty table, the unfilled places. He looked at his father, his voice small, a thread of pain that pierced Richard's heart. "Daddy," he asked, "don't they like me?" Leo's question, cast into the silence of the room, wasn't just a question. It was the materialization of every rejection, every closed door, every ignored invitation. It was the sound of a 7-year-old's heart breaking. Richard felt the air leave his lungs, the expensive marble floor of his mansion opening up to swallow him whole, all his money. His fortune accumulated over years of relentless deals, his assets spread across the globe. It was all useless in the face of that pure, simple pain. He had no answer. There were no compound interest or dividends that could buy his son's happiness at that moment. He was paralyzed, a giant chained by his own impotence. It was Helena who moved. Her own eyes were filled with unshed tears, a pain that echoed Leo's, but her paralysis lasted only a second. She knelt in front of the boy, holding his small, devastated face between her hands. "No, my love," she whispered, her voice choked but firm. "They don't know you. If they knew you, they would love you." Then she stood up, her eyes shining with a fierce determination, the same that had led her to create a party with crepe paper streamers. She took Richard's hand, a touch that jolted him from his stupor. "We are not going to let them win," she said, her voice low but charged with a strength he didn't know existed. "We have a cake, we have fudge, and we have a birthday boy. The party is happening. We're just changing the venue." Richard looked at her, uncomprehending. "We're taking the party to the sidewalk," she continued, a plan forming in real time. "We'll invite whoever is passing by. The doorman from the building across the street, the woman who walks her dogs, the cotton candy vendor who always stops at the corner, The plan was absurd, improvised, illogical, and for that very reason, it was perfect. Within minutes, the operation began. Richard, moved by her contagious energy, carried the small table out to the sidewalk in front of the mansion. Helena brought the cake, the fudge, and the colorful cups. A light rain began to fall, mixing the smell of wet asphalt with the sweet scent of chocolate. The scene was surreal, a birthday party set up on the sidewalk of one of the wealthiest streets in the tri-state area. And then, the miracle of the city happened. The doorman from the neighboring building, Mr. Johnson, whose son had been one of Leo's first friends, came over to see what was happening and smiled. A neighbor returning from the gym stopped, curious. Two children playing in the nearby park ran over to see the colorful table. The cotton candy vendor, drawn by the small commotion, approached with his cart. Helena lit the candles on the cake, shielding the flame from the drizzle with her cupped hands. And everyone, an unlikely chorus of strangers and neighbors, sang "Happy Birthday" to Leo. They sang it his way, with pauses, as he blew out the candles once, twice, 3 times. And amidst the singing, a boy appeared at the corner, shyly holding his mother's hand. It was Michael, the classmate who had cancelled. He looked at the scene, the cake on the sidewalk, and took a step forward, a small smile on his face. Richard watched it all, standing slightly apart as the fine rain dampened his shoulders. He looked at Helena, who was handing out slices of cake on paper plates, at Leo, who was showing Michael how to spin cotton candy on the stick, at this group of people who didn't care about brands, status, or net worth. They were just there, sharing a moment of simple, powerful joy. And he understood. He understood that love wasn't just about providing, it was about being present. Love was also logistics. It was having the courage to carry a cake out into the street in the rain. In that instant, something inside him shifted. A tectonic plate moved. He took out his phone. He didn't call his publicist or a lawyer. He called the chairman of the school's board again. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, but with the hardness of steel. "Good afternoon. I've made a decision. My son matters more than any contract or this school's reputation. Starting Monday, my company will fund the creation of a permanent inclusion program for the entire school community. And I demand that it be co-led by the Parents Association from Willow Creek Park and by Helena. Her name is Helena, and if there is any resistance, I'll see you in court and in the press." He hung up, his heart pounding, not with anger, but with a newfound purpose. Richard's call to the school board had the effect of a stone tossed into a still pond. The ripples were immediate and turbulent. Pressured by her superiors, who feared the loss of a powerful benefactor and a public scandal more than their own consciences, the headmistress agreed to all conditions. The friendship circles were scheduled. The fluorescent lights in Leo's classroom were replaced with warmer, softer bulbs. Monitors received express training on conflict mediation and sensory adjustments for recess. The victory was swift, corporate, almost soulless, but the real fruits, small and delicate, began to sprout in the day-to-day. One morning at the school gate, Michael's mother approached Helena and Leo. "I wanted to apologize," she said, her eyes downcast. "I was a coward. Your son is a lovely boy." On Wednesday, Clara's mother offered them a ride home. As rain was in the forecast, they were minimal gestures, seeds of change beginning to germinate in the once barren soil of that community. The greatest transformation, however, was happening inside the mansion. Richard, the man who lived shielded by expensive suits and the distance of his fortune, began to shed his armor. He dug out an old camera, a hobby abandoned in his youth in the name of building his empire. But he no longer photographed the luxury cars in his garage, symbols of a static patrimony. Now, his lens sought the details that had once escaped him. Leo's hands smudged with frosting, the dog sleeping with its nose on the boy's feet, Helena's smile when she saw him arrive home early. He was discovering that the greatest assets in his life couldn't be quantified in dollars or euros and didn't yield quarterly dividends. The return on this new investment in presence and affection was immeasurable. Helena, in turn, blossomed under the sun of this newly won trust. In the first meeting for the inclusion program, she allowed them to call her by her name, no longer Mr. Sterling's employee. Her voice, once hesitant, became firm as she suggested ideas, sharing her experience. She was finding her place, not as an appendage to someone else's life, but as a driving force. Yet, between her and Richard, a fragile, invisible barrier remained. Their complicity grew in small gestures, in glances exchanged over Leo's head, in the way they worked together to organize the new party, the one that would finally happen. But prudence held them back. He feared mixing gratitude and admiration with something that could destabilize the new harmony of the house. She feared losing her job, and worse, the family she had found, if she confessed the feelings that were growing in her chest, frightening her with their intensity. On Friday night, the eve of the big party, the house was filled with an expectant silence. Leo was already asleep, dreaming of fudge and friends. In the living room, Richard and Helena were finishing blowing up blue balloons. He, clumsy, kept letting the air escape. She, with a practical flair, tied perfect knots. They were sitting on the floor, close to each other, the lamplight creating an intimate circle around them. The last balloon was filled. Silence settled in, filled only by the sound of their breathing. He looked at her, watching how a stray strand of hair fell across her face, how her lips curved into a tired half-smile. He felt an overwhelming urge to say something, anything, that would break the barrier. But the words, which flowed so easily in multi-million-dollar negotiations, failed him. She, feeling the weight of his gaze, lifted her face, her eyes meeting his in a silent question. The air became electric, charged with everything that had gone unsaid in recent weeks. Tomorrow's party would be a celebration of Leo's acceptance, but at that moment, the greatest tension in the house was right there, between two adult hearts, afraid to take the next step. Saturday dawned with a sky of a deep, clear blue, as if the city had washed its face for the occasion. The air wafting through the mansion's open windows was no longer cold and thin, but carried the scent of baking cheese puffs and cooling fudge on the counter. Leo's party began promptly at 3 in the afternoon, and this time the guests came. Children from school and the park mingled on the foam mat spread across the living room, a mosaic of childhoods that had once seemed to belong to different worlds. Michael and Clara were there, along with the baker's daughter and Mr. Johnson's son. The music was low, a soft background for the laughter and conversation. There were no hired entertainers or extravagant decorations. There were balloons, a modeling clay corner, and the warmth of a house that had finally become a home. Richard watched the scene from a corner of the room, phone out of hand, mind not calculating the interest on his latest investment. He was entirely there, present, and he saw in Leo's eyes a brightness that no fortune in the world could buy. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Helena brought the cake to the table. It was a simple chocolate cake, covered in colorful sprinkles, identical to the one from the sidewalk party. The children gathered around, their faces lit with anticipation. Richard positioned himself on one side of Leo and Helena on the other. The candles were lit, 7 small flames dancing. Everyone began to sing "Happy Birthday" in the slow, paused rhythm that Leo loved so much. At the end of the song, before he could blow, the boy did something unexpected. He reached out his small hands and took his father's hand and Helena's hand, joining the 3 of them. A hushed, expectant silence fell over the room. Leo looked first at Helena, his eyes full of absolute certainty, and then, in a voice clear and loud enough for everyone to hear, he said the 2 words that would redefine everything: "I love you." "Mommy!" The impact of those words was seismic. A collective gasp went through the room. Richard felt the floor disappear and reappear beneath his feet. The tears he had held back at the first party, tears of shame and guilt, now came uncontrollably, but they were tears of pure, overwhelming emotion, and for the first time in his life, he didn't hide them. He wept openly, in front of everyone, his pride dismantled, his soul laid bare. Beside him, Helena was also crying, but with a smile she didn't know she possessed, a smile that lit up her entire face, erasing any trace of invisibility. That "I love you" wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, the purest and most honest of all. Richard took a deep breath, wiping his face with the back of his hand. This was the moment. He looked at the parents present, at the children, and then his gaze settled on Helena. His voice came out firm, not with the commanding tone of business, but with the serene authority of a man who had finally found his true north. "We've learned a lot these past few weeks," he began. "Me, more than anyone. I've learned that a house isn't made of possessions, but of presence, and that a family isn't born ready-made, it's built." He squeezed Helena's hand. "I want to build a home here, a place where our son's rhythm is the rule, not the exception. A place where love is the primary investment." He turned to face her completely, the world around them fading away. "I don't know the way, but I want to learn with you. Will you walk with me, slowly, at the same pace?" The request wasn't a fairy tale. It didn't offer a kingdom, but a path, a partnership. Helena looked at him, tears still shining in her eyes, and nodded. "Yes," she whispered, and in that yes, she wasn't accepting a prize for her suffering. She was making a choice. The choice to finally be the protagonist of her own story. Life in the Greenwich mansion didn't transform overnight, but it readjusted to a new rhythm, slower and more intentional, like the lullaby Helena would hum in the late afternoon. The 5th week after that first rainy party unfolded into a series of sunny Sundays. The garden, once an impeccable and lifeless set piece, became the stage for the Happy Birthday workshop. It was Helena's idea, co-led by Richard, an informal gathering for new families from the association and the school. There, among picnic blankets and the smell of grass, Leo, with the seriousness of a professor, taught other children his way of blowing out candles, turning what had been a point of exclusion into a ritual of belonging. Richard, with his old camera slung around his neck, no longer photographed perfection, but imperfect joy. A scraped knee, a toothless smile. Helena's hands adjusting a crooked party hat on the head of his son's new friend. The mansion, once cold, now carried the constant scent of a cake baking at dusk. At school, the friendship circles continued, no longer as an imposition, but as part of the culture. The inclusion program, funded by Richard's capital, but nurtured by the empathy of Helena and the other mothers, became a benchmark, a small beacon in a city so often indifferent. Each victory, however, carried the scar of a renunciation. The contract Richard lost was never recovered. He had to make public apologies in board meetings for his initial stance, swallowing the pride that had for so long been his main driver. He discovered that true wealth wasn't in limitless accumulation, but in knowing what was important enough to lose the rest for. The inheritance he now cared about building for Leo wasn't a stock portfolio, but a legacy of dignity. There were still difficult days, sidelong glances at the school gate, insidious rumors that died for lack of oxygen, the difficulty of balancing the demands of his business with his new dedication to his family. But now, he didn't face anything alone. His relationship with Helena deepened through silent gestures. In a coffee, he brought her in the morning without her asking. In a conspiratorial glance exchanged over Leo's head during dinner. In long conversations late at night, planning the next steps for the program, where she was no longer the employee and he was no longer the boss. They were partners, learning to navigate new and delicate territory, respecting the time of their own wounded hearts. He was still a multi-millionaire, and she was a woman of humble origins. But the social barriers, which once seemed insurmountable, dissolved before the simple truth that they both wanted the same thing: a safe place to love and be loved. On that last Saturday of the month, as he watched Leo help a little girl get the timing of the song right, Richard felt a peace that no positive stock market close had ever given him. He saw Helena smile at him from across the garden and understood everything. The knot in his stomach from that rainy afternoon had finally come undone. The journey had been painful, each step a battle against his own pride and the world's prejudice. But there, under the Connecticut sun, surrounded by the laughter of children, he realized that the greatest lesson of his life hadn't come from economics textbooks, but from a cinnamon coffee cake, a spontaneous "I love you," and two people who, together, learned that love is, above all, adjusting the timing of your heart to listen to the one who always deserved to be heard.